Hello there, my name is Mark Barnabas, your data protection pal, and today I'm going to share with you about Zoom. Have you been Zooming recently because of the stay at home, or in Singapore we call it a circuit breaker, and using more software like Zoom to get connected to people through webinars or just meetings? So here are some tips provided by infographics from the IMDA, the IMDA and CSA, the Cyber Security Agency of Singapore, and IMDA is the Information Media Development Authority of Singapore, and of course PDPC is the Personal Data Protection Commission. So on to these tips. Tip number one for hosts: use generated IDs. For some of you who are hosts, and this is a feature you might want to know because you are allowed to create meetings either using your own personal ID or generated random IDs through Zoom itself. This will be useful if you're going to have a class because you do not want people to be calling you if they know your personal ID, or worse, Zoom bombing, going into your meeting and disturbing. So that'd be useful. And when you create meetings or seminars, webinars, you should set a password. It is very useful. However, I have been receiving invites for several Zoom meetings, and these people would send meeting IDs with the passwords in the same message. So, what kind of security are we talking about then? So, passwords should be sent separately from the invite to the meeting ID rather. So, very important. So, this is also repeated by CSA in point 2, where they tell you to secure your meeting. So point 3, turn off join before host. This option allows the host to disallow participants from coming to the meeting room before the host starts up the meeting room. So something that you might want to take note of. But number 4 is probably something that you really want to use because it's repeated both on the IMDA and CSA infographic. That is to have a waiting room feature, meaning that before you admit someone into the actual meeting room, you could actually verify their identity. Perhaps you could see the person's face to make sure that they are who they are, identify them before you allow them to join the meeting room where everybody else is in. So that is really important. Point number 5 from IMDA is to notify of recordings. This is certainly a PDPC thing because consent is a very important obligation in the Personal Data Protection Act, and I'm sure consent is also a very important obligation in many of the personal data regulations all over the world. So if you're going to record the meeting itself, you have to let your participants know. And on the same note, you must also let your participants know and disallow them from recording if it's a condition in your meeting. All right, so that's why number 6 comes in: disable recordings. If you're sharing something sensitive, you might want to disable your participants from recording the meeting, and that is repeated somewhat in point 4 of the CSA tips. Now, on recordings itself, you might also want to take note that while participants cannot use the function on Zoom to record the entire meeting, it doesn't stop the person from using a third party or an app outside Zoom to record the screen on the computer. So do take note of that, because it doesn't mean that you disable recording on Zoom that the participant or learner cannot record. I mean, the learners can also take screenshots, or as simple as using a phone and take a picture while the meeting is going on. So be very careful of that, and you might want to also notify participants. Of course, the least you could do is have everyone put the webcam on so you can see what they're doing. You don't want them to be doing this, but really it's very hard. So be very careful what you share, which brings on to point 5 in the CSA tips. You don't want to be sharing personal data through these webinars. And I mentioned that in my previous tips, that be very careful when you share information, because you don't want to be openly disclosing the wrong information to people in the room, right? So be very careful of that. So you can also disable sharing, because you do not want someone to be bombing the rest of the participants with irrelevant stuff, or worse. In the case of Singapore, there was a case where I would say, some idiot bombed into some school webinar through Zoom and started to send out pornographic materials, which is totally irrelevant and just downright disgusting. So be very careful. And moving on to some other tips that mentioned by CSA, point number 6. There's a chat board on Zoom itself where people could type and share information. Of course, you could also disable the chat board, but if the chat board is in BOARD, not BOT, so with the chat board on, people are happy to post messages or even send links or files. So as a user or even a host, you might want to also let your learners know, or people in the group know, that hey, if it's a file, be very careful that it's not with a virus. Of course, you wouldn't know, so just don't click anything or open any file unless you are very sure that it is safe. All right. So finally, point 7 on the CSA guide: update your devices. This is a basic rule in cybersecurity nowadays. You want to make sure all your devices are updated, security patches then done. So ensure that you have the basic virus scans updated in your computer. Not all free stuff are good, so my advice is to get a reputable virus scan. Go check it out with your IT guys what is a reputable one, or ask friends who are familiar, and make sure you update the patches. Like Zoom would have done regular patches over the past week, ever since they have been subject to many security scrutiny and criticism. So I believe Zoom would improve, but whatever the case, whether you're using Zoom, Cisco WebEx, Google Meets, or whatever meeting platform, please be very careful. Do not let yourself be a victim of cyber attack, and do not allow yourself to make a mistake of sharing personal data and getting yourself into trouble with the regulators in your jurisdiction. So this is Mark Barnabas, your data protection pal. I hope this helps you, and stay safe, be safe, and now I tell people, preach being safe. Thank you and take care. Goodbye.